All right. So I have a variety of disturbing horror genre books here. I was going to get into them right now. There should be something in this pile of recommendations that I have for every kind of reader, even if you haven't really found your taste yet, or you do know what your taste is. These kind of apply to different ranges of different spectrums of what you like in a book. There's so many different options and different approaches that these authors take to that dread, terror, suspense, just the way that something can stick with you and entertain you while you're reading it in different ways. So these are some horror books. I guess they fall into that category, even though they do diverge slightly each different one. Some of them more literary, some of them more like commentaries on things, some of them more actual stories that are like horror story, traditional plot lines, and some of them diverge. So I have a whole bunch. I even have one that's short stories on here. So depending on what you're into already, these are some that I've read that stand out to me. I have a ton more that I could go into, but these kind of are the ones that I want to start with. So, Headful of Ghosts by Paul Tremblay. Now, this is a carefully written story. So, I'd say the number one thing you have to think about with this story is how if you like ambiguity, okay, it's terrifying in that way. The same way like The Thing. I don't know if you ever seen that movie. Ambiguity. I'm not going to spoil too much here. This is a carefully written book. Paul Tremblay, he also wrote Cabin at the End of the World. If you've experienced that movie or the book, you'll know that ambiguity is part of his way he conveys horror to you by leaving it up to you to figure out what is reality and what is not. Anyway, the premise of this book, you got this family, the Barretts. They're like a New England suburban family. And the daughter starts coming down with like schizophrenic symptoms, Marjorie. And it follows the family through all these different events related to that. And I like the way this book sticks with you. I like the way this book reads. It's kind of a modern book. It's a modern author. Very easy to follow the prose. It's also very excellent prose. Paul Tremblay is a really great author that people should check out. So, Headful of Ghosts. Not going to review it fully, but I will say you could get through this pretty quick. It's like 300 pages. I do like this one a lot. I hesitated for a while because I did read Cabin at the End of the World first, and then I was like, okay, I know what it was a totally different story. That's also a good one. It could be on this list, but I went with this one because it's got that schizophrenia, but could be a different thing, and you just need to go. It's a wild ride, this book. So I really did enjoy this a lot. And you just get to kind of sit there and choose for yourself, decide for yourself what's going on with this family based on all these different occurrences. Really did enjoy that. Next one, diverge totally from that kind of thing. Get that out of your head. George R. R. Martin, Fever Dream. Okay? I wish he did more stuff like this. I so enjoyed this book. Now, it is, 458 pages. So if you don't, want a big commitment, this is a 500-page book almost, okay? But what I have to say about this book is that George R. R. Martin's probably one of my favorite authors for a reason. I read all of Game of Thrones, and then I got into this, and I'm like, why am I discovering this now? Because I wanted more George R. R. Martin. I'm like, what else do I read? Don't really like Fire and Blood, so I didn't keep going with the Game of Thrones. I read one of the prequels, which was good, but here we are, George R. R. Martin, Fever Dream. It's a vampire story set in like late 1800s Louisiana bayou with steamboats, and just so cool. Such a cool concept, and the way he captures, it's like haunting, but you're there in the bayous. You could feel the atmosphere there. It's the middle of summer right now. It's just a great book for that. I really think this was super cool. It has very scary moments. It has gruesomeness, as all of George R. R. Martin's works have. It also has a bit of a dark romance element. It does vampires really well in their own way. It's not a spoiler to tell you that either. And it's this guy who's a riverboat captain, and his interactions and his problems that he ends up getting into with specific vampire things that work their way into his life, even though he is a reluctant protagonist. So I just really enjoyed this. You got Mississippi, deep bayou, like southern historical fiction, romance with that horror factor mixed in, and you got world building like based on historical. Oh man, this is a hidden gem. Maybe it's not so hidden. I don't know if people out there are talking about it, but Fever Dream. I couldn't believe this. It stuck with me for so long. I still love it. I haven't read it in like a couple of years now, and I still remember the feeling that it gave me, and it just was great. So if you stumble across this, I actually recommended this to one person. They read it and they cried. They loved it, and they read it and they were crying, and I can see why, because this can evoke like feelings as you're reading it, and it just has the way he actually ends a story well. Okay, George R. R. Martin doesn't like, he's infamous for not ending Game of Thrones. We're still waiting, right? Which, if he sees this video, please end it, even if it's a shitty ending. We just need something. But Fever Dream, look into it. George R. R. Martin, really loved that one. It's got everything that you want from what I explained there. Hell House by Richard Matheson. Now, he's the guy who wrote I Am Legend. It's a short book. I could have included that too. Actually, I Am Legends are really good. Kind of like onboarding if you're trying to get into books. It's short, okay? And well done, and just encapsulates itself, finishes strong. Great story. Hell House, though, a little different. Hell House is set in the 70s, so you got like 1971 setting, right? Which is kind of cool because there's some technology in the book. But anyway, here's what this is about. It has nothing to do with the movie, okay? So there is a Hell House movie. Don't worry about that. So let's see how many pages we got. So you got around 300 pages for you guys. Richard Matheson, really cool author. He does this story has a lot of things in it, but basically there's a group of people going to this haunted mansion, and they're basically being paid to prove or disprove life after death. And it's a discussion. So the people that go there, let me tell you, there's a parapsychologist who is like a scientist, heavy deep in scientist, like an atheist, physics based, like he's a physicist. That's Dr. Barrett. And he keeps insisting there's logical explanations for everything. You also have another character that's with him who's a spiritual medium. And then you have a character who's survived in the past when people try to go here. Famously, this place ruins people's lives, or you just disappear, or you just die. It's a very malevolent place. It's a very haunted house book. You feel the presence of what's going on at all times. Belasco House, you feel that entity. A chair moves, a cup falls over, whatever it is, you feel that entity there. It's just constant. He does a great job making you feel that horror while also having that discussion. There's a discussion going on between science, faith, afterlife, spirituality, consciousness, and there's some trigger warnings in the book. There's some SA. There's some gruesomeness. There's definitely gore, and there's definitely unfortunate events that occur. So it is not something I would give to a young, impressionable mind, or I would definitely have to warn you before you pick it up and read it. There is a scene in here for sure that could trigger you if you have that situation. But if you're okay with all bets off, you can handle whatever, go with Hell House. It is fun along the way. I got some humor out of it. I got some deeper understandings of Richard Matheson sort of using the characters to debate in front of you while they're experiencing these things. And it's just very excellent. It's like a classic plot line with twists and turns and such. But definitely enjoyed this book, Hell House by Richard Matheson. Not a long read, pretty accessible prose. Very fun. Fun book for me. With some traumatic events, but when I start showing you the next couple books, you'll see that it gets increasingly more traumatic and disturbing from here on out. This is a very disturbing book that I'm going to show you. This one really, it has everything you could think of that's just depraved and messed up. Tender is the flesh. This is a very disturbing book. It's a dystopian novel where all meat, the whole meat industry goes under because of a virus that infects animals, so we can't eat them anymore. So, naturally, we organize around that constraint, and guess what? Industries start breeding a special kind of human that they use as meat. Human meat is back on the menu, boys. Anyway, this follows Marcos through his job with that meat industry. Okay, so he's working in like a meat industry, the human meat industry, and it's kind of his story and how he all these different experiences that are relevant to the world that has become this world that Marcos lives in. This author, never heard of her before, and then got this book, and I'm so glad I did. It was very disturbing. It's going to stick with you. It's going to be upsetting. A lot of upsetting things happen in this. Gruesome, terribly awesome book. It, I think, is a commentary on our society and like commercial meat industry. It's obviously playing on that. It's going to discuss that and go deep, and it's going to also just crush your soul. This is a very bleak, overwhelming book at times. Super disturbing. Okay, you see the little cow head and the human face and the beautiful, jawline. Anyway, super recommend this if you got a good stomach for messed up stuff and you need something, a little bit more intense. Also, the way the mood is, the entire book, the way the story kind of feels, the vibe of everything. You have this apathetic main character who kind of borderline goes into optimism and back to reality, and he just wavers, and it's relatable. Really enjoyed this book, even though it's so messed up. Okay, let's go to an even more depraved, messed up. You've heard of it before. This is American Psycho by Bret Easton Ellis. On the surface, if you don't know anything about this book, it's set in the 1980s, aristocracy, Manhattan, people with money. It's a commentary on culture at the time and where it was headed. Bret Easton Ellis carefully wrote this book. It's not full of plot, okay? There's not like some overarching thing. There's no hero's journey. There's no conflict resolution even. It's just Patrick Bateman, the main characters, batshit crazy stuff. It goes from, him just in a taxi, like looking at the city as he's driving through it, to like just going to deeper and deeper. He's trying to be satisfied, or at least engaged or interested, or feel even a small amount of anything about anything, but he's having a hard time doing that. And take that really far, there's a lot of gruesome scenes and just crazy stuff. It's a commentary on excess. Just excess brutality, excess materialism, a void, that emptiness. The people's names all get mixed up. You'll be half confused half the time, like who's talking to who's who. It's excellent because it seems like it wants to throw you off, but that's literally, nobody matters. It's just this crazy, crazy commentary about life. There's scenes where he's, doing horrible things, and then there's scenes that are just as entertaining of him just having conversations. And you hear these the people don't listen to each other. It's kind of relatable, even though he's so depraved and just a messed up soul. And Patrick Bateman, I can't help but have some empathy for this guy. even though he's definitely horrible, and there's some terrible things in this book. And there's bad words too. It's a 400-page book, but I've read it twice, maybe 3 times. After doing such, I figured out that there are these really lengthy reviews. He has like product reviews as entire chapters. And Bateman just goes on and on about materialistic stuff, like deep reviews. It's very interesting to me, but I skip those sections completely now because you can skip them too, because it's basically filler. It's just meaningless. It's all meaningless, and that's the point. He just keeps driving it home throughout the whole book, and you have this. I laugh so much reading this, and it's not trying to be a funny book at all. You know, the scene with the cards, you know, it's just so funny and dark and messed up and then horrible, and it sticks with you, and it's even worse in a lot of ways than the last book I just mentioned. But yeah, if you can't handle something gross, some messed up stuff, some taboo, don't go near this. But if you like something that's a little dark and a really funny commentary on American values too, from the 80s, excess, the aristocracy, those high-end people with materialistic items, it's just unbelievable. Okay, there's really nothing that happens. Nothing, like, there's no rising revolution, whatever. Nothing happens. You just go with him as he struggles to feel, and that's really what this book does. So don't go into it expecting some crazy hero's journey or any kind of structured plot or thriller twists or anything. It's something a little different. I definitely recommend it, but it's not going to be for everyone. I get a super kick out of this one because of just the way that it all goes down, just the moment to moment. And now this is a collection of short stories. 6 of them are in this book, and I'd say 4 of them I really liked. Okay, 2 of them, they're short, so they're short enough and it doesn't like kill you to read them. They are all interconnected in some way, right? There's items across all of them, and if you read it with a close eye, paying attention to certain things, you'll see too what I'm talking about. But basically, I get a really strong Hellraiser vibe from this book. This is Nathan Ballingrud, Wounds. Okay? 6 stories from the border of hell. So this is a special book. Like, it's really, there's a lot of, I would say it's a masterpiece, right? He's a very intelligent writer. This guy's a super interesting writer. He captures this dark, it's almost gothic, but there's so many different stories that come from so many different angles. One of them could be like a Nightmare Before Christmas, right? I feel like this Nightmare Before Christmas vibe in one of them. It's like almost you're reading a cartoon in one of them. These like goblins that are eating children. It's just this crazy like Halloween Town kind of thing in one of the short stories. Then you have what it starts with is the Atlas of Hell. The first stories are about this like criminal mobster hitman guy, and he's commissioned to find the Atlas of Hell. Anyway, he ends up in a bayou in a shack, and the whole thing is just not what you expect. And I really enjoyed that first story, which ties into like 2 of the other stories. You have the Diabolist, which is this like strange story from a different perspective. Basically a girl whose dad was summoning demons. She's trying to resurrect him, and it's from the perspective of this demon, and it's just bizarre. So the first story is really good. The second and third story, I'm like, they weren't for me, but you might like them a lot. And then 4th, 5th, and 6th. 4th and 5th are my favorite. I think the 4th one, The Maw, is one of the shortest ones in the book. And it describes like this area in a city that basically there's these creatures just walking around, like hauling dead bodies and living people, and just kind of creating this entire city of flesh, just like taking people apart, knitting them back together, and just making this like network of flesh that's all just vibrating. And it's so like it follows these people who are going to this one guy who's paying this girl to bring him in there to find his dog. The Maw. That was my favorite short story in this. And it just captured this like really brutal and just like surreal place. And the book delves into that. Like if you know Hellraiser, there's another dimension in Hellraiser. There's like this other hellish dimension. And this is kind of what this book plays with. That interaction between the two. The dimension of hell coming to earth. Those how it seeps in the cracks and how you get to that. It's just so dark, and there's so many different ways it takes, paths to do it, and it's very fantastical at times. It's very so there's a show, there's a movie. It's based on the short story in here called The Visible Filth, and it follows this guy who works at a bar. Girl leaves the phone behind. He grabs the phone, and he sees these horrific images on the phone, and then it just gets more bizarre as the story goes on. And you have some love elements in it, and that actually comes up quite a bit in this. There's like interhuman personality things and also physical pain that seem to be the gateways of accessing portals to this hell dimension and stuff, and just the way it comes over and the way it's interdimensional, and you don't understand everything right away, and it just is very dark, pretty gruesome, a lot of body horror, but like masterfully done. It's a magical book for sure. I really did enjoy this. I went back and reread a couple of the short stories, and I like them. I like them just as much, if not more. I'd say 4 out of the 6 of these stories, like, flawless, and then 2 of them were just not for me, but still, I can't imagine how this same guy wrote all 6 of these, right, with those fantastical stories in the middle, the second and third story, Skull Pocket and Diabolist. So, out of all these stories here, if you get your hands on this book, I'd say do it. It's just a little more outside of the box. It has Clive Barker. It harkens to Clive Barker. It harkens to Hellbound Heart. It harkens to Hellraiser. If you saw the first and second Hellraiser specifically, those are awesome. The way that whole thing works, the way it presents, the way it comes across, the way they talk about things, the mood, the way love and the way pain and the way body horror and the fantastical objects that are involved, right? These objects, and you'll see the stories are linked. The last story in this is a little bit more busy of a story, The Butcher's Table, but it does link the stories together. That takes place in like pirate times, at the edge of hell, the shores of hell. It's just crazy. This thing, it's world building happening in this. Like, he could continue to build into this world, but it's loose enough so that it feels like most of the stories take place in like reality, and then historical, and then just batshit crazy. It's all over the place. He definitely has a complex way of weaving things together. Might not be for everyone, but it's definitely short stories, so you could just read one of the short stories, skip to a different one, read that. You know, you don't have to go from first story to last story, although I suggest just reading all of them, even if you don't outright. I had to read The Diabolist twice, and if I go back and read it again, it's still like so heavily encoded. This is probably a masterpiece, and if you can appreciate good literature, this is probably for you. Okay? Wounds by Nathan Balagrid. If you like that hellish kind of accessing that extra dimensional objects that do these things, and just the way angels, just the whole thing, darkness manifesting itself into human lives, gruesomeness, and these strange stories that don't seem that they could be related. They're all just all over the place. Bam. This book's pretty interesting. I did get a kick out of it. If you ever read Dante's Inferno or are familiar with that kind of hell, I get that from this too, so take it with a grain of salt, but that vibe, that darkness, that the way hell works there, the whole thing, just the mood, it's just very interesting to me, this one, right? So 6 stories from hell, from the borders of hell. I hope he drops another one of these, or maybe he did and I don't even know it. Anyway, got a stack of books here. If I had to say like the most friendly of all of them for like a beginner who's not sure what they like yet, or I'd say Headful of Ghosts and Hell House both follow a plot. They have a plot line. They're not like literary. They're just literary fiction. They're just like horror books straight up. This one does a little bit more with messing with your head. This one is way more of like a haunting story with obviously the commentary I talked about before. Science versus spirituality versus measurability versus consciousness. And then if you want something super gruesome and just messed up, you have both of these. This one's shorter, so if you want something quick read that'll fuck you up, Tender as the Flesh is absolutely whacked out. Not for kids, not for the faint of heart. If you like short stories, Wounds, give it a run. And if you know George R. R. Martin's a master writer and you want a hidden gem from his collections, Fever Dream. Has nothing to do with Game of Thrones. It's a vampire story set in a setting that I really enjoyed. So it's like a historical fiction, horror, romantic, dark, and also has a great plot that continues and goes. And good luck trying to choose from one of these books because they're all excellent in their own way. That's all I got today. I was going to go a little deeper on each book. I tried not to, okay? Hopefully I didn't spoil anything for anyone. I don't think I did, because by the time you go and read the book, you'll see that everything I said is only 1% of what actually the book's going to do for you. So thank you for watching. I'm going to do more of these book drops soon. Peace.